The station floated in silence above a blue-white gas giant, turning slowly like it was thinking about something too large to finish. Its outer rings glowed with soft amber light, not for beauty, but because the species that built it believed light made truth harder to hide. Elias Ward stood inside the arrival chamber with his hands relaxed at his sides. He wore a simple human envoy uniform, gray fabric, no symbols except a small patch showing Earth's oceans. His breathing was calm, but his mind was not. This was not fear. It was focus. He was the first human ever invited alone into a formal cultural exchange with the Kelari. The Kelari were not hostile. They were not friendly either. They were careful, old, and deeply curious. Humanity had been watched for decades before first contact was even attempted. Now, finally, a human stood inside their station, not as a subject, not as a test animal, but as a guest. That fact alone made the room dangerous. Across from Elias, behind a translucent energy screen, several Kelari observers watched without moving. Their bodies were tall and slender, with skin that shifted color slightly as they breathed. Their faces were smooth, their eyes large and dark, reflecting light instead of producing it. They did not whisper or signal. Silence was how they listened. A door on the far side of the chamber opened with a sound like wind through glass. She stepped in. Lurie was younger than most of the observers, though Elias only knew this from the brief data he had studied before arrival. Her skin was a soft silver blue, marked with faint lines that pulsed gently near her temples. She wore a layered robe, carefully arranged, covering her from neck to ankle. Her posture was straight, but her steps were slow, deliberate. She was nervous. That surprised Elias. He had expected confidence, or at least trained calm. Instead, she moved like someone who knew the importance of the moment and felt its weight fully. She stopped several paces away from him and inclined her head. Elias mirrored the motion. It was not a bow in human terms, but close enough to show respect. "I am Lurie," she said, speaking in carefully practiced human standard. "Xenological researcher, cultural liaison." Her voice was clear, almost musical, but there was tension under it like a held breath. "I am Elias Ward," he replied, "envoy of Earth." For a moment neither spoke. The silence stretched, not awkward but dense. Elias felt the attention of the observers like pressure on his skin. Every movement, every pause was being measured. Lurie gestured gently toward the center of the chamber. "We will begin with a private exchange," she said. "Observation only, no interruption." One of the observers shifted color slightly, a sign of agreement. The energy screen dimmed just enough to give the illusion of privacy while still allowing full monitoring. Lurie took another breath. "There is something you must understand about my people," she said. "We do not build trust through words alone." Elias nodded. "We understand that communication takes many forms." Her eyes focused on him more sharply now. "Among the Kelari, trust is established through chosen vulnerability. To remain protected is to remain distant." She paused, then added, "This is not a test of dominance. It is a test of sincerity." Elias listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He did not assume. Lurie reached up and placed her fingers at the edge of her robe. The movement was slow, ritualistic. "If I remove my outer covering," she said, "it means I accept you as safe. As honest, as one who will not take advantage of exposure." Her fingers hesitated. "Will you stay if I undress, human?" The question landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Elias did not react immediately. His face did not change. Inside, however, his thoughts moved fast, not with panic but with calculation and care. He understood now. Not the words alone, but the weight behind them. This was not seduction, not in the way humans understood it. This was a cultural bridge built from a very different idea of trust. To the Kelari, the act was symbolic, almost sacred. To humans, it carried meanings shaped by long histories of power, intimacy, and misuse. If he stayed without question, it could be seen as acceptance. Or it could be seen as something else entirely, depending on who was watching and how this moment was remembered. If he left, it could be seen as rejection or fear. He looked at Lurie, really looked at her. Not at her body, not at the robe, but at her eyes. They were steady but uncertain. She was not trying to control the situation. She was offering something she had been taught was necessary, even if she did not fully understand the other side of it. The observers behind the screen did not move. They waited. Elias spoke gently. "I will stay," he said, and Lurie's fingers relaxed slightly, "but not if you feel you must undress for me to trust you." Her hand stopped completely. He continued, his voice calm, clear, and firm. "Where I come from, removing protection can mean many things. Sometimes it is chosen freely. Sometimes it is expected. Sometimes it is taken. Trust cannot grow in all of those situations." Lurie slowly lowered her hand. "You are refusing the ritual," she said, not accusing, just stating. "I am refusing the idea that trust must require you to be exposed," Elias replied, "especially when I am not asked to do the same." Silence again, but this time it felt different, thicker, sharper. One of the observers shifted color rapidly, a sign Elias had been told meant surprise. Lurie's skin patterns flickered, faint and uneven. "No species has ever said this," she said quietly. "That does not mean it is wrong to question it," Elias said. "If you want to know who I am, ask me. If you want to know if I will respect you, watch what I do, not what I allow." She studied him now, not as a subject, but as a person. Her posture changed, becoming less formal, more real. "You are not offended?" she asked. "No," he answered, "but I am careful, and I believe trust should make both sides stronger, not leave one unguarded." Behind the screen, the observers were no longer silent. Soft tones passed between them, too low for Elias to understand, but full of tension. Lurie stepped back from the ritual position. With deliberate motion, she adjusted her robe, securing it fully. The act felt heavier than if she had removed it. "I was taught this was respect," she said, "but you speak as if respect can exist without exposure." "It can," Elias said. "It often does." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She sat down. The chamber was not designed for sitting during formal exchange. The floor was smooth, cool, and unmarked. Elias hesitated only a second before sitting as well, mirroring her choice. "This changes how I must report this meeting," Lurie said. "Some will say you insulted us. I hope others will say I treated you as an equal," Elias replied. Her eyes softened slightly. "That word," she said, "equal, many species use it, few mean it." "I can't speak for all humans," Elias said, "only for myself and for what we are trying to be." The station hummed quietly around them. Outside, the gas giant storms rolled endlessly, powerful and indifferent. Lurie looked past Elias for a moment, as if imagining something far away. "If trust does not begin with exposure," she said slowly, "then how does it begin for humans?" Elias thought carefully. "With choice," he said, "and with restraint. With the ability to walk away and still choose to stay." She considered that. The observers finally reactivated the screen's brightness, signaling the end of private exchange. The moment was over, but its impact had only just begun. Lurie stood. Elias stood with her. "This meeting will be discussed," she said, "debated, some will not be pleased." "I understand," Elias said. As she turned to leave, she paused. "Human," she said, not formally this time. "Your answer shocked me." He allowed himself a small, respectful smile. "I think," he said, "it shocked me too." The door closed behind her, and Elias was left alone with the watchers, the station, and the quiet knowledge that nothing about first contact would be simple again. The chamber felt colder after Lurie left. Elias remained standing where he was for several seconds, aware that the observers had not stopped watching him for even a moment. Their attention did not fade when privacy ended. If anything, it sharpened. The Kellari did not miss details, and they did not forget moments that challenged their understanding of the universe. The energy screen dissolved completely, leaving nothing between Elias and the council except open air. One of the observers stepped forward. This one was taller than the rest, its skin shifting slowly through deep shades of blue and gray. Elias recognized the pattern from his briefing files. Senior authority, possibly the council speaker. You refused a foundational trust right, the Kelari said. Its voice was layered as if several tones spoke together. Explain. Elias did not rush to answer. Humans had learned through hard history that speed was often mistaken for honesty. He folded his hands loosely in front of him, a neutral posture. I refuse the requirement, he said, not the trust. The Kelari's skin pulsed once. Among us they are the same. For humans they are not, Elias replied. The council member tilted its head slightly. Clarify. Elias took a breath. Trust to us begins when someone has the power to harm you and chooses not to use it. It grows when both sides accept limits, when neither side is forced to prove sincerity through loss. There was a ripple of color among the other observers, a quiet reaction Elias could not fully read. You suggest our ritual causes loss, the council member said. I suggest it creates imbalance, Elias answered carefully. One side exposed, one side protected. Even if both consent, the structure itself carries risk. Another Kelari stepped forward, its skin flashing briefly in sharp contrast. All previous species accepted the right. None were harmed. Elias nodded. I believe that, and I respect your history. But humans carry different scars. We have learned that systems can be well-intentioned and still cause harm over time. The room remained silent. Elias could feel the weight of Earth behind him. Billions of lives, thousands of cultures, all reduced in this moment to his words and his choices. He did not speak for all humanity, but he represented something larger than himself. The senior Kelari finally spoke again. Your presence here was granted because your species demonstrated adaptability. This response confirms it but also complicates it. I expected that, Elias said. You will remain aboard the station, the Kelari said. Further evaluation is required. I am available, Elias replied. The council withdrew, their bodies shifting color as they left, their movements smooth and silent. The chamber emptied, leaving Elias alone again, this time with only the hum of the station and the distant glow of the gas giant beyond the viewport. He exhaled slowly. The door opened again not long after, softer this time. No ceremony, no observers. Luri stepped inside. Her robe was arranged more simply now, the formal layers reduced. She looked tired. Her skin patterns were subdued, less controlled than before. They are arguing, she said without greeting. I assumed they would, Elias replied. She moved closer, stopping a respectful distance away. Some say you insulted us. Some say you revealed a weakness we did not know we had. And you? Elias asked. She hesitated. I do not know yet. She looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and frustration. Why did you stay? Elias frowned slightly. I told you, because I wanted to. That is not enough, she said. You could have ended the exchange. You could have avoided the risk. Instead, you stayed and challenged us. Because leaving would have been easier, Elias said. And easier choices don't build trust either. She studied his face. Humans, she had learned, revealed much through small expressions. Tension around the eyes, tightness in the jaw. Elias showed none of the signs of victory or pride, only fatigue and something like concern. You put yourself in danger, she said. You must understand that. I do, Elias replied, but I believe the danger was worth it. For what? She asked. For honesty, he said. And for you, that caught her attention. You did not know me, she said. No, Elias agreed. But I knew you were being asked to offer something before understanding what it meant to me. That mattered. Luri looked away, her skin patterns rippling faintly. I was chosen because I am adaptable, she said. Because I question things. Now they will question my judgment. Change often begins with discomfort, Elias said gently. That is easy to say when your position is secure, she replied. Elias met her gaze. It is. She seemed surprised by that. You are human. Your species is new, but you are protected by novelty. Novelty fades, Elias said. Principles remain. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Lurie spoke again, more softly. Will you tell me, she asked, what your people fear about exposure? Elias considered how much to say. This was not a diplomatic question. This was personal. We fear losing choice, he said finally. We fear that what begins as voluntary becomes expected, and what is expected becomes demanded. We fear systems that punish those who say no. Lurie listened carefully. Among us, she said, exposure is seen as the purest form of truth. For us, Elias said, truth can exist with protection. Sometimes protection allows truth to survive. She absorbed that slowly. An alarm sounded faintly through the station, low and distant. Not urgent, but not normal either. Lurie's posture shifted instantly, professional instincts taking over. That is not scheduled, she said. What does it mean? Elias asked. Possibly a systems anomaly, she replied, or something worse. Another tone followed, sharper now. The lights dimmed slightly, then stabilized. Lurie activated a console on her wrist, her eyes scanning data Elias could not see. Her skin patterns shifted rapidly, indicating focus and concern. A power fluctuation in the lower research ring, she said. Environmental control is unstable. That area is occupied, Elias asked. Yes, she replied. Non-Kelari visitors, observers from other species. Elias straightened. Are they in danger? If containment fails, Lurie said. Yes. She hesitated, then looked at him. You are not required to involve yourself. I know, Elias said. He did not hesitate. Take me there, he said. Lurie blinked. You do not understand the layout, the protocols. You do, Elias said, and I can help. She studied him for a brief moment, then nodded. Follow me. They moved quickly through the corridors, the station's architecture flowing around them in smooth curves and soft light. Elias noted how the environment responded to movement, lighting paths ahead, adjusting gravity subtly. Advanced, but not flawless. As they descended toward the lower ring, the temperature dropped slightly. The air felt heavier. Environmental shields are failing, Lurie said. If the system collapses, pressure loss will be immediate. Can it be stabilized? Elias asked. Possibly, she said. But the control node is manual now. Automation is offline. Then we go manual, Elias said. They reached the access chamber. Inside, several alien visitors stood clustered, their body language tense, confused. The lights flickered. Lurie moved to the control panel, her fingers moving quickly. I can reroute power, she said, but it will overload the conduit unless someone stabilizes the physical regulator. I'll do it, Elias said. Her head snapped toward him. You are not adapted to our environment. Pressure variance. I've trained for worse, Elias said. Tell me what to do. She hesitated only a second, then gave instructions. Elias followed them precisely, gripping the regulator as the station trembled around him. The force was intense, vibrations rattling through his bones, but he held on, adjusting as instructed. The system steadied. The lights stabilized. The air pressure normalized. Slowly, the danger passed. Elias stepped back, breathing hard. His hands ached, muscles strained, but he was intact. The alien visitors stared at him, their expressions unreadable but clearly shaken. Lurie looked at him with something new in her eyes. You stayed, she said quietly. Yes, Elias replied, because it mattered. Later, as the station returned to calm, word of what happened spread quickly. Not just that a human helped, but that he did so without being asked, without ceremony, without requiring trust rituals or symbolic exposure. He acted. And among the Kelari, action carried weight. Lurie watched as reports flowed through the network, debates intensifying. The human's refusal was no longer the center of attention. His choice to stay was. And that, she realized, was far more dangerous to tradition than any insult could have been. The station did not return to normal after the crisis. On the surface, systems stabilized, lights held steady, and environmental controls resumed their quiet work. But underneath, something had shifted. The Kelari were not a species that reacted loudly. They reacted slowly, deeply, and with consequences that unfolded over time. Elias felt it in the way the corridors grew quieter when he passed. In the way conversations paused, not out of fear but thought. He was no longer just the human envoy. He was the human who acted without ritual, without command, and without promise of reward. That made him difficult to categorize. Lurie stood inside her private research space, reviewing records late into the cycle. The room was dim, lit by soft panels that responded to her focus. Data streams floated in the air, showing logs of the power failure, council discussions, and fragments of historical archives. Again and again, her attention returned to one point. The moment Elias chose to stay. Among the Kelari, trust rituals were ancient, older than their current government structure, older even than their first interstellar contact. They were built on a belief that truth required exposure, and that exposure proved sincerity. But Elias had exposed something else entirely. A flaw. Lurie replayed the recordings of the exchange, slowing down his expressions, his tone. There was no hesitation born of fear. Only care, restraint, choice. That unsettled her more than open defiance ever could. A signal pulsed through her console indicating a private request. Council summons. She straightened and accepted. The chamber was larger than the one Elias had first entered, circular and open, with no barriers this time. The council stood spaced evenly around the perimeter, their skin patterns muted but alert. Elias stood near the center, hands relaxed, posture steady. He looked tired. Lurie moved to her place beside him, aware that her position alone would be noticed. She was not meant to stand so close to a non-Kelari during council review. The senior council member spoke. "The incident in the lower ring has altered the context of your actions," it said, addressing Elias. "You intervened without obligation." "Yes," Elias replied. "Why?" another council member asked. "Because lives were at risk," Elias said simply, "and I was able to help." "That is not sufficient explanation," the council member replied. "Many species prioritize self-preservation." "Humans do too," Elias said. "But we also value responsibility once we are present. If we can help and choose not to, that choice defines us." A murmur of shifting color moved around the chamber. Lurie felt tension build. This was no longer about ritual. This was about philosophy. One council member stepped forward. "Your refusal of exposure suggests mistrust of our ways, yet your actions suggest concern for our people." These positions conflict. "They only conflict if you believe trust is a single action," Elias said. "For humans, it is a pattern." The senior council member turned slightly toward Lurie. "You were the liaison. Do you support this interpretation?" The question carried weight. Her answer would shape not only Elias' fate but her own. Lurie did not answer immediately. She remembered standing with her hand on her robe, remembered the expectation pressed into her training, remembered the moment Elias spoke, not with authority but with respect. "Yes," she said finally, "I support it." Color flared sharply across several council members. "Explain," the senior member said. "Because," Lurie said carefully, "the human did not reject us. He rejected imbalance. He chose to remain without demanding sacrifice. That choice aligns with our core value of sincerity, even if it challenges our methods." Silence followed, heavy, evaluating. One council member shifted forward. "If we allow this perspective, we risk destabilizing long-standing practices." "Or strengthening them," Lurie replied. "Practices that cannot withstand questioning may already be weak." The chamber grew still. The senior council member turned back to Elias. "Your presence continues to create disruption." "I understand," Elias said. Disruption can be dangerous, it continued. So can stagnation, Elias replied calmly. Another pause. Very well, the senior member said. You will remain aboard the station, not as a guest, not as a subject, but as an observer participant. Elias raised an eyebrow slightly. Meaning? You will be allowed to move freely, the council member said, to interact, to observe our society as we observe yours. Any further consequences will be determined by what you choose to do. Lurie felt her chest tighten. This was unprecedented. Elias nodded slowly. That is acceptable. The council dismissed them. As they left the chamber, Lurie walked beside Elias in silence for several moments. Finally, she spoke. You understand what they are doing, she said. They are watching how far I will go without being told, Elias replied. And how far we will bend, she added. Yes, he agreed. They reached a quiet observation deck overlooking the gas giant. The planet's storms rolled endlessly below, vast and violent, yet held at a distance by invisible forces. Lurie leaned against the railing, her posture less formal now. You make things difficult, she said. I've been told that before, Elias replied, a hint of humor in his voice. That was not criticism, she said. It was observation. She turned toward him. May I ask you something personal? You may, Elias said. Why does your species place such importance on restraint? She asked. You have power, adaptability, yet you limit yourselves. Elias looked out at the planet. Because we learned what happens when we don't. He was quiet for a moment, then continued. Our history is full of moments where strength was mistaken for right, where exposure was demanded in the name of truth, where those who refused were punished. Lurie listened closely. We are still learning, Elias said. Still failing sometimes, but restraint is how we remind ourselves that power should serve choice, not erase it. She absorbed his words slowly. A new alert pulsed through the station, sharper than before. This one carried urgency. Lurie's console lit up. There is unrest, she said, not physical, ideological. Among the Kalari, Elias asked. Yes, she replied, and among other species present, news of the incident is spreading. Some are questioning their own trust rituals now. Elias frowned slightly. That was not my intention. Intent does not control impact, Lurie said. You showed an alternative, that is enough. They moved quickly toward the central exchange hall. Inside, representatives from multiple species stood in clusters, their forms diverse, their energy tense. Voices rose, not in anger but confusion. A tall avian-like delegate spoke loudly. If exposure is not required, then how do we measure sincerity? Another responded. If sincerity requires exposure, then how many have been coerced without realizing it? The room buzzed with debate. Elias stepped forward not to command attention but because the crowd naturally shifted to face him. He felt the moment closing around him. He spoke clearly but not loudly. Trust is not measured by how much you give up, he said. It is measured by what you choose not to take. The room quieted. You can build trust through shared risk, Elias continued. Through mutual effort, through actions that protect rather than expose. There is no single path, only honest ones. Some delegates reacted with approval, others with discomfort. Lurie watched closely. This was the real test, not of Elias but of what the station would become. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Lurie stood alone, reviewing the reactions. Change had begun, uneven, uncontrolled. She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt something close to hope. Elias approached quietly. I didn't mean to start a movement, he said. You did not, Lurie replied. You started a question. She looked at him. And questions are far more dangerous. He nodded. They are also how growth begins. The station lights dimmed as the cycle shifted. Outside, the gas giant continued its endless storm, unchanged by debate or philosophy. Inside, something far more powerful was moving, not exposure, choice. And neither of them yet knew how far it would go. The station felt different now, not in its structure or systems, but in its rhythm. Conversations no longer stopped when Elias entered a room. Instead, they slowed, shifted, sometimes even opened. The Kelari did not approach him directly very often, but they watched, listened, and adjusted. For a species that valued slow certainty, this was movement. Lurie noticed it more than anyone. She saw it in the research halls, where younger Kelari paused rituals to ask questions instead of completing them automatically. She saw it in the way visiting species spoke more freely, less carefully, as if a silent rule had been loosened. And she felt it most strongly in herself. She no longer touched her robe with the same unconscious awareness. The ritual that once felt like identity now felt like habit, not wrong, but no longer unquestionable. The council, however, was uneasy. Elia's status as observer participant gave him access, but it also placed him under constant scrutiny. Every choice he made was recorded, every interaction was analyzed, and not all reactions were positive. Some Kelari elders believed the station was losing cohesion, that the human had introduced instability disguised as ethics. They did not accuse him openly, but pressure built quietly, like stress in metal. That pressure found its moment during the assembly convergence. The convergence was rare. All species currently aboard the station gathered in the central hall to reaffirm protocols of cooperation and trust. Traditionally, it ended with shared rituals, each species demonstrating their version of sincerity. This cycle, tension hung in the air before the convergence even began. Lurie stood at the edge of the hall reviewing the program. Her name was listed beside the Kelari Trust Right. Her chest tightened. She knew what that meant. Across the hall, Elias stood among representatives from Earth's small delegation, speaking quietly. He sensed her attention and looked over. Their eyes met. He did not smile, he waited. The assembly began with formal statements: cooperation, stability, mutual respect. The words were familiar, but the tone beneath them was strained. Then came the demonstrations. Species after species presented their rituals. Some involved shared risk. Others involved symbolic surrender. A few involved complex displays of biological signaling that Elias did not fully understand, but he respected the intent behind them. Finally, the Kelari were called. Lurie stepped forward. Her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. She could feel the eyes of the council on her back. Expectation pressed down on her like gravity. She stood at the center of the hall. Silence fell. She began to speak, her voice steady but quiet. "Among the Kelari," she said, "trust has long been shown through chosen exposure. We believed that revealing what could be harmed proved sincerity." She paused. "In recent cycles, we have been challenged to examine this belief." A ripple of color passed through the Kelari elders. Lurie continued. "We have learned that exposure does not mean the same thing to all species, that what feels voluntary to one may feel coerced to another, and that trust may take forms that do not require vulnerability of the body." Murmurs spread through the hall. Lurie lifted her hands, not to her robe but open, palms visible. "Today," she said, "I choose a different demonstration." The hall went completely still. She turned slightly, facing not the council but Elias. "I will remain fully protected," she said, "and I will speak freely." Some Kelari gasped softly. Others flashed sharp color patterns. Lurie took a breath. "I trust the human envoy," she said clearly. "Not because he asked for exposure, but because he refused it. Not because he demanded proof, but because he acted when action was needed." She turned back to the assembly. "This is my sincerity." The reaction was immediate and intense. Color surged across the Kelari elders. Voices rose, overlapping, controlled but urgent. Some delegates from other species leaned forward, attentive. Others pulled back, unsettled. The senior council member stood. "This is a violation of protocol," it said. Lurie met its gaze. "It is an evolution of it." "You speak without authorization," another council member added. "I speak with responsibility," Lurie replied. "The same responsibility we claim to value." The tension cracked. Debate erupted across the hall, not chaos but forceful disagreement. Words crossed species lines, concepts collided. Elias did not speak. He stayed where he was, visible, calm, present. That mattered. Eventually, the senior council member raised a hand. Silence returned slowly. This assembly was not convened for philosophical upheaval, it said. Yet it has occurred, Lurie replied. The council member turned its gaze to Elias. Human envoy, your influence is undeniable. Do you wish to respond? Elias stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. I did not come to change your traditions, he said. I came to understand them, and in doing so I was understood in return. He looked around the hall. Trust is not fragile, he continued. It does not break because it is questioned. It breaks when it is forced. Silence again, this time deeper. The council withdrew for deliberation. The wait felt long. The hall remained full but quiet. Lurie stood still, her heart racing now that the moment had passed. Elias moved to her side. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Yes, she replied. I did. He looked at her. There may be consequences. There already were, she said. Now there may be meaning. When the council returned, the senior member spoke with measured weight. The Kelari will not abandon our rituals, it said, but neither will we enforce them upon those who do not share our understanding. A collective breath seemed to move through the hall. Furthermore, it continued, we recognize that sincerity can be demonstrated through action, restraint, and mutual protection. The council member turned to Lurie. You will retain your position, it said, but your work will be reviewed. Lurie inclined her head. I accept. The council then addressed the assembly. This station will serve as a place of shared choice. No species will be required to surrender protection as proof of trust. The words settled like a stone dropped into deep water. After the assembly dispersed, Lurie and Elias stood alone near the observation deck once more. The gas giant turned below them, endless and uncaring. You changed everything, Lurie said. Elias shook his head. You did, she looked at him. You stayed. Yes, he said. She considered that. Many thought humans stayed only when it benefited them, she said. Now they see you stay even when it costs you. Elias smiled faintly. We're still learning when to do that. She looked out at the stars beyond the planet. What happens next? She asked. Now, Elias said, now we live with the questions we've raised. Lurie nodded. That may be the hardest part. Yes, Elias agreed, but it's also how progress begins. The station lights dimmed as the cycle ended. Inside its walls, traditions had not fallen, they had shifted. And the galaxy quietly took note. The station entered a quiet cycle after the assembly convergence, but it was not a peaceful quiet. It was the kind that followed great change, when everyone moved carefully, aware that old rules no longer worked the same way. Elias felt it in the air. He had been invited to stay longer than planned. The council had not said it directly, but the message was clear. Humanity was no longer just being observed. It was being considered. That carried weight. Lurie continued her work, but her role had changed. She was no longer just a xenological researcher. She was now a reference point. Others came to her with questions they had never asked before. Younger Kelari asked why rituals existed. Elders asked how to preserve identity without force. Some days she felt proud. Other days she felt afraid. Elias noticed the strain. One cycle, as they walked together through a quieter corridor, he spoke. You don't have to carry this alone, he said. She looked at him surprised. It is my people. Yes, Elias replied. But change always costs someone first. That doesn't mean you have to pay everything. She was silent for a while. Humans seem very comfortable with disagreement, she said eventually. Elias smiled slightly. We're not comfortable, we're just used to it. A message arrived that same cycle, a formal one. The council requested Elias' presence for a final review, not evaluation, review. That word mattered. The chamber was smaller this time. No energy screens. No observers hidden behind layers of protocol. Only the senior council members and Elias. You have altered the station's function, the senior member said. I did not intend to, Elias replied. Intent is no longer the primary concern, it said. Impact is. Elias nodded. Then I will accept responsibility for my actions. That response caused a subtle shift among the council. Your species has been observed for many cycles, another member said. You are unpredictable, emotion-driven, yet capable of restraint. We struggle with that balance, Elias said honestly. And yet, the senior member continued, you demonstrated something rare, the ability to remain present without demanding control. Elias did not respond. He waited. We must ask you directly, the council member said. Why does humanity seek the stars? This was the question, not about trade, not about technology, not even survival. Elias took a slow breath. We seek the stars because we are unfinished, he said. Because we know our flaws and we hope that by meeting others, we can learn to do better than before. The council listened closely. We are not here to conquer, Elias continued, nor to prove superiority. We are here because staying only on our world taught us the limits of our thinking. We want to grow beyond that. The chamber was silent. Finally, the senior council member spoke. You will be offered a permanent presence within this interstellar network, it said. Not as subjects, not as subordinates, as equals. Elias felt the weight of that word again. We accept, he said simply. The decision spread quickly, across the station, across communication networks, across species. Humanity was no longer a curiosity. It was now a participant. Lurie received the news in her research space. She sat down slowly, absorbing it. When Elias arrived later, she was still there, staring at the data display. It's done, she said. Yes, Elias replied. She looked at him. Does it feel like victory? He shook his head. It feels like responsibility, she nodded. That seems very human. In the cycles that followed, small things changed. Trust rituals became optional, not mandatory. Some species kept them, others adapted. A few abandoned them entirely. Conflict did not disappear, but it became more honest. Humans did not dominate discussions. They listened more than they spoke. When they spoke carefully. That surprised many. One cycle, during a joint forum, a delegate from another species asked Elias directly, "Why do humans stay involved when they could leave?" Elias answered without hesitation. "Because walking away is easy," he said. "Staying means accepting responsibility for the impact you've had." That answer was recorded, shared, quoted. Lurie watched it spread and felt something settle inside her, a sense of direction. Later, she stood with Elias at the observation deck one final time. The gas giant still turned below them unchanged. "You will leave eventually," she said. "Yes," Elias replied, "but not forever." She considered that. "When I first asked you that question," she said, "I thought staying meant remaining when exposed." "And now?" he asked. "Now I think staying means remaining when it would be easier not to," she said. He smiled. "That's a good definition." She looked at him, her skin patterns calm, steady. "You shocked me," she said. "I'm sorry," Elias replied lightly. "No," she said, "I am grateful." They stood in silence, watching the stars. Far beyond the station, other species would hear the story, not of a ritual refused, but of a choice made, not of exposure, but of restraint, not of a human who took, but of one who stayed. And in quiet ways across the galaxy, that story would change how trust was understood, not as something demanded, but as something chosen.